Well, welcome everybody to Empowering Pastors and Leaders. Today is a great day. I think I say that every week. Today is a great day. Why? Because every day, this is the day the Lord has made, and we have a choice to rejoice and be glad in it. You know, I love today because I love teaching leaders. Why do I love teaching leaders? Because when you teach a person, that might be just a person. But when you teach a leader, you're teaching all the people that he's leading. So it is a tremendous privilege to be able to speak to leaders. Thank you all that are watching online, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to invest in yourself. There's no greater investment than you, because God uses you. So when you only have a little bit to give, then the people can only receive a little. So the more you are developed in your skill sets of being a great leader, remember there are good leaders and great leaders, then you have the privilege and opportunity of leading more people. And that is a phenomenal compliment, that God would trust you to lead more people. Today we're on week 2 on correction. We're going to talk today on how to be corrected. How to be and how to. So we're going to cover 2 things kind of quickly today, because I believe that without any reservation, a person that is not willing to be corrected is an individual that will never aspire to greatness. You cannot aspire to greatness if you are not willing to be corrected. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11 says, For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So correction is a training process. Proverbs 3, 11 and 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves those whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. Proverbs 10, 17. Whoever heeds instruction is on the path of life. Think that now. Whoever heeds instruction is on the path to life. But he who rejects correction leads others astray. The need to grasp as a leader is that if you are not going to be led properly, or you are not going to yield to discipline properly or correction properly, you've got to recognize that all the people you're leading are now following you in the same ditch. This is a problem, because a rebellious spirit is as the sin of witchcraft. And rebellion is the opposite of submission. And so when we start talking about correction, correction is normal and it is necessary. If you are going to be that successful person, you have got to embrace correction, and you've got to embrace the ability to have someone to speak into your life. Now, correction should not be malice. But even if it's malice, it's good. I knew I was going to get quiet on that one. Here's the key. If you have nobody in your life that can correct you, then you are a rebellious spirit. Now, I didn't say on the outward expression of the ability to correct you, because there's different types of rebellion. You have outward rebellion that simply says, I don't care what you say, I'm not going to do it. It's right to the face. But then you have passive rebellion that is more dangerous than any of the other kind. And that is, sit down. And in your head you say, I'm sitting down, but inside I'm still standing up. That is the most damaging, defacing of your capabilities, because you will never be the leader you're called to be. You will spurn that same spirit in your followers. And then you'll be angry because when you go to correct them, they won't receive from you. They can't receive from what you don't give. So this is the principles of sowing and reaping. The principles of sowing and reaping is the fact that you and I have got to be willing to be corrected. So correction is necessary. Correction is positive, no matter even how it's delivered. And correction, if you have no one that can do that to you. I remember talking to an individual one time. I asked, who is their authority? Who are they submitting to? And the statement was, how do I say it? The statement was, it was a denomination. But they never called them, they never talked to them. If you don't have somebody close enough that can recognize when you're starting to veer off, then you have a rebellious spirit. That means you're protecting yourself. You're trying to keep yourself from correction. Whatever the initial reason for that is, doesn't matter. You can't change what's happened to you, but you can change where you are. You've got to make sure that your heart is supple enough, close enough to somebody that they can correct you. If not, you're going to veer off, and there's no one to grab you. There's no one to identify that you have problems. I was just talking to an individual the other day, and they had said that a father had passed their church off, the church off to his son. And one day during church, the son stood up and said, "We no longer believe in hell." So the father went and corrected the son. He had someone close enough to correct him. But what happened when the father corrected the son did not respond to the father, which means that the son was unteachable. The son was submitted to no one. And when you're submitted to no one, it is just a matter of time before error comes into your life, and you then become a tragedy rather than a success story. So it's not just correction coming, you've got to be willing to receive it. Receiving of correction, as it says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11, that no correction is pleasant for the moment, but it yields. Remember, everything that happens is seed time and harvest. When you are corrected and you receive it, it yields. So there's a need for us to be in that position. We have got to have somebody that we are submitted to that is an authority over us. Now, that sounds a lot of fun when you're younger, when you've had good experiences. But can you imagine being 30 plus years in the ministry and someone correcting you? Now you still have to come to the place of saying, and this is where pride is and has to be demolished, that at no point in your life should you ever be without somebody that's over you correcting you. And if you are, you're in a bad spot. So correction is a matter of recognizing that somebody is authority over you, which means you've got to submit to somebody. This is all a matter of the heart. I've watched a lot of exterior submission, but real submission is gauged when correction is brought that they don't like. Until you are corrected, either in a manner and or for something that you don't agree with, you do not and cannot truly gauge your level of submission to an authority. Everybody loves to submit to somebody they like. But the truth is that you're not always going to like your leader. Your moms and dads. You didn't always like your moms and dads. Why? They disciplined you. They corrected you. They tried to realign you. You wanted to be you. Well, the problem is you were on a path of destruction. For there's a way that seems right unto man that leads to destruction. A true leader, whether or not they're godly or ungodly, whether they do it correctly or incorrectly, that correction has nothing to do with them. It has to do with you. Say amen or oh my. That is uncomfortable. And until you can be corrected and being told to do something that you don't like to do, then you really don't know whether or not you are submitted to anybody. I like to actually correct people different ways to see a response. Why? Because if a person is uncorrectable, then you cannot trust them with more responsibility. So until you're able to gauge by trial and by evaluation, you don't know what level you can trust them at. And I've got news for you. Even if they were loyal and even if they were submissive and even if they were yielding at one point in their life and you've trusted them with greater responsibility, doesn't mean they're not going to turn from that later. But you have the responsibility as a leader to gauge whether you have the person in responsibility that is not going to cause you more problems than it is going to cause you good. And that is all to the principles of submission and correction. I remember telling somebody one time, I don't want you to do that. Well, Pastor, I love you, but the Lord told me. Well, I'm sorry. I'm the voice of the Lord right here. And if it's not biblical, you're responsible to respond to me. Boy, that got a lot of smirks, didn't that one? Because we think that the Lord told me, therefore I'm going to obey the Lord. The fact is that Lord works through men. And as long as it's not non-biblical, you are responsible to follow the leader. If not, you are rebellious. We all like to correct. But if you can't be corrected, there has to be a greater correction that you can't lead. And so, as a leader, we must learn how to receive correction. By receiving it, we are then positioned and posturing ourselves to be able to give it. For without receiving, you can't give. So it is a matter of the heart in receiving. John 14:15. If you love me, obey my commandments. Who said that? Jesus said that. So Jesus is dealing with the same principle of correction. And we're going to get into it. How many times Jesus corrected? How did he correct? Well, he was just so sweet. Oh, no, he was not. Well, he did it all privately. Oh, no, he didn't. Jesus did some strong things. Why? Because he had to prove the ones that he was going to leave the kingdom in their hands with. He was going to ascend to the right hand of the Father, and the apostles were the ones that were going to take the vision that he birthed to the next level as Christ is the head of the church. But if Christ could not correct and trust of their response, then you would find there would be no way for him to trust. And trust is a big part because trust is generated through the process of obedience. And obedience means that you trust your leader. Well, I don't trust my leaders. Well, I have a greater question for you. If you don't trust your leaders and they're trustworthy, then it's not the leader's problem, it's your problem because you have a rebellious heart. And the rebellious heart was spurned out of wound. When you are always in protection mode that you never allow someone in to where you can trust them, you have positioned yourself in a rebellious posture. Because your obedience will never be of the heart, only of mandate. When submission or correction is responded to only out of mandate, then you know that in your heart you have disconnected from your authority, and it is nothing more than you just in survival rather than in thriving and maturating, developing and becoming a greater leader. So these principles are not small principles. These are crossroads in every one of our lives that we will be consistently, even in your 50s and even in your 60s and even in your 70s and even in your 80s, if you have an authority over you like you should, you will be corrected because you're not always right. And the issue is, how are you going to respond? I've been corrected very badly in times past. And I had to make a decision. Will I respond godly? Will I respond because I know that even though they did it poorly, I want to aspire to be great? I had to make those decisions. And every one of us have to make the decision on receiving, especially from your pastors. The Bible says very clearly, Hebrews 13:17, obey your spiritual leaders. What does the word obey mean? I can't hear you. Listen and apply. Obey your spiritual leaders and do what they say. What does that mean? Well, I don't agree with them. I don't think it says that in there. No, let me read it again. And do what they say. No, it doesn't mean you agree with them. If it is not non-biblical, then you are in submission, required to receive correction and follow that path. Well, what if they're wrong? God will bless you for your obedience, and God will correct them for their loss. Now, again, I'm saying if it's non-biblical, that's not what I'm talking about. But if it's not a non-biblical issue, then you need to respond to that correction and obey. Some things you have to do is that number one thing. When you're corrected, you need to filter that through the Word of God. Is what I'm being corrected for, does it align with the Word? If it doesn't align with the Word, then you are not obligated to submit to that correction. That is your number one criteria. Number two, you need to filter it through the information away from the presentation. I'll read it again. Filter the information away from the presentation. Because we are humans, we don't always do things well. Amen. You can have the correct intentions. You can have a good heart, but still not do it well. This means, as the person being corrected, you have to be willing to say, I don't like the presentation, but what about the information? Because the information might be correct, even if the presentation is wrong. And by you throwing the information away because you didn't like the presentation, you have just made, this is what you've done. You're now positioned to go around the mountain again to learn that same lesson over and over and over again. Like the children of Israel who wandered around that mountain for 40 years. So you've got to be able to separate the information from the presentation. I remember one time I was in my last church, and a guy jumped up and started to prophesy. And his prophecy was right on. The prophetic word was right on. But the presentation was angry. It was spoken with an angry tone. Now, the prophecy was correct, but the presentation was wrong. So I corrected him on his presentation. But yet many people did not receive the information because they did not separate information from presentation. And they lost. They lost the word from the Lord. Was he right? Right with the information. Was he correct on presentation? No. Do not ever throw the correction that you're receiving away because you do not like the presentation. This will save you. And remember, if you give it, come on now, you'll receive it. Because you're not always going to give it right. You also have to filter the information away from your agreement. You're not always going to agree with the information. It doesn't mean it's wrong. What is correction? Correction is taking somebody that's on a path that is veered off from the goal. And your correction is a realignment to bring them back to the correct path. Now, a leader who truly loves people wants to see you and I always become all that God put within us. Not reach halfway, but all the way. So if you are going to reject a correction because you don't agree with the information, but yet you don't agree with it because your mind is skewed, or you're in an emotional state, or you're going through a time that is stretching for you. Sometimes God is going to correct you, a leader is going to correct you with information that you don't agree with that is absolutely biblical, and if you choose not to follow that correction, then your path will become longer and more painful. I remember we were out this year with Julian, my grandson, and we were walking through the woods. And I said, Julian, stay right behind me. There are a lot of pickers out there. If you don't know what pickers are, they're, what do they all say? Thorn bushes on my piece of property. And they're not small. These beasts, if you get entangled with them, you know you've just lost a quart of blood. They're going to attack you, wrap you up. You are never getting out. You're going to need a MacGyver knife to get out of that thing. I said, Julian, walk right behind me. And he didn't. He walked just to the side. And when he walked to the side, he got entangled. Pampy had to go get him out. Well, he didn't die. He still would have got where he was going, but it was just going to be a lot more painful. And that's what happens when you throw away the information of correction because you don't agree with it. If your leader is truly governed to bring you to the greatest place that God has called you, then they might take you on a path you have never been before that you don't agree with because you have never been there. The need to filter is important because, let's be real, as a leader, we're challenged. We have 10 things on our plate. You've got to bring a correction, and you might have just come out of a hard meeting. You might be too strong. That would be my greater failures. I am either too strong or I am too light. I am known for giving somebody too many chances, too many opportunities. That's what I'm known for. But then when a decision is made in my head of something that needs to be accomplished, it's straight to the point, baby. There is no cotton candy. It is just bam. And sometimes that seems a little too harsh for people. And sometimes it is too harsh because I'm just through. And that's not positive on my behalf. But at the same time, as a leader, correcting the people that are with, some people need to be corrected harshly. Some people won't listen unless they're corrected harshly. Some people demand it. One lady that pastored in this church demanded. She simply said, I was too weak of a leader because I was trying to be kind to her. Just tell me the way it is. Okay, here it comes. You're fired. See? So let's be real. You've got to, and I've got to be willing to receive correction. I believe God has blessed me because I've been one who's always received correction. Haven't liked it. I've been slapped by my leaders, publicly rebuked by my leaders multiple times. I have a story, but I won't give it. I have been ignored by my leaders. I have been trash talked behind my back by my leaders. But I learned a long time ago, it is to my safety and my wisdom to always be submitted to somebody that has the right to correct me even wrongly. Because then I'm positioned to hear. And if I've learned nothing else, I've learned I will never correct that way. You can always learn. It is never a bad experience. It is just an experience. What is the difference between a bad experience and a good experience? Your emotional response, not the information. So I've chosen many years ago not to allow my emotions to get involved during correction. I should say when I'm receiving it. Because I need the information to become better. And even if they are wrong, which some of them have been, even if they are wrong with their correction, I've learned great information. I've learned that I won't do that to somebody else. I've learned that, listen now, I will submit to that because it's not unbiblical, and I know God will bless me. Now, if you're the leader bringing correction, you must do it in love. If you're not correcting in love, then you're a dictator. Dictators are not people that are going to be followed well. I was trying to look for the word dictatorial. Dictatorial leadership is never followed well, especially by intelligent people. Intelligent people stay very short periods of time with a dictatorial leader. If you're going to be a leader, your goal is to see and to take people. Your success is making other people successful. Your success is seeing the greatness in somebody and maturating, developing, and loving on them. Your leadership is not a position. Leadership is not a posture. It is a matter of the heart of God's call on your life. I'm talking spiritual now. To where you're going to be able to take someone on the adventure to become who they're called to be. That is a genuine leader. I have people say to me, well, I got a job. I'm a leader over these amount of people. No, man, you're missing it. You got a job. That means you're just telling them what to do. You're not leading them there, and you're not building them to be you. What did Jesus do? The law of duplication. He duplicated himself. So as leaders, we've got to know that this is so very important that you have got to correct in love. The reason behind your correction is you do not want to see them crash and burn. Sadly enough, you can't help everybody. Sadly enough, as a leader, you try to snatch them, you try to help them, you try to correct them, you try to tell them no. And at times in correction, you've got to tell them, no, you are not doing that. You can't tell me what to do. That's a rebellious spirit. Someone once told me, well, I got to listen to God before I listen to you. Really? Well, that is not true biblically. If it is non-scriptural, yes. But if it's not non-scriptural, you are responsible to obey your leader. You need to read the book Spiritual Authority by Watchman Nee. That's an old book. You should read it every year. 2 Timothy 4, 1-4. I solemnly charge you in the presence of God and of Jesus Christ, who is the judge of the living and the dead, and by his appearing in his kingdom, preach the word. Be ready when the time is right, and even when it is not. Keep your sense of urgency, whether the opportunity seems favorable or unfavorable, whether convenient or inconvenient, whether welcome or unwelcome. Correct. This is the job of the preacher. This is the job of the ministry. Correct those who are in error of doctrine or behavior. Warn those who are in sin. Exhort and encourage those who are growing toward spiritual maturity with inexhaustible patience and faithful teaching. For the time will come when people will not tolerate sound doctrine and accurate instruction, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers who to satisfy their own desires and to support the errors that they hold. I have found that there are a lot of people who step into that non-corrective position, have created a path for themselves, generated in their own minds by their own dreams, and blame God for it. Well, God told me. Really? Well, you can't obey here. What makes you think you're going to obey God there? If God can't trust you with the little obedience, God will never trust you with the big obedience. If he tells you to give that away, sow that, and you can't sow that, what makes you think when you need $8 million you can sow even one? If you can't obey your leader here, and all of a sudden you're now leading tens of thousands of people, and we have examples in the 1980s, church rumbled because of the unwillingness to be corrected by Jimmy Swaggart. You young people have no clue what I'm talking about. Look it up. He was one of the strongest men in the late 70s and 80s. Literally, one of the strongest evangelists. I believe he gave $40 million a year just in missions money. And when it came time for him to be corrected, he wouldn't. When his denomination said, sit down for 2 years because of your sin, he said, no, I'm not giving up my ministry. And you know what? He's still on TV. But he'll never be what he was supposed to be. Now he's very mature. But who he was supposed to be would not be accomplished because of his lack of obedience. If you can't be corrected, you're in a bad spot. Peter was rebuked publicly by Paul in the book of Galatians. Jesus rebuked the disciples many times. Jesus corrected and confronted publicly. Jesus corrected and confronted directly. Jesus resorted to, I'm not even going to do that one, that was foolish. Jesus corrected and confronted by means of comparison. Jesus corrected and confronted wrong motives and excuses. Jesus resorted to a physical act of righteous anger. He was not running around not being strong. If you're going to be a true leader, you're not always going to be liked. And the moment you start actually correcting people, you're not going to be liked. But that's part of leadership. If you're liked by everybody, well, then you're not a leader, you're a politician. You're not liked by everybody. And that's part of it. You're hated by many. Jesus, the greatest leader of the world, was hated, and all he ever did was good. Not everyone's going to like you. And even people that you have led are going to not like you. Because they're not going to like having to submit to your authority. They're not going to like being corrected. That's not your problem. Your problem as a leader is not that everyone's going to follow you. Your problem as a leader is not veering off from the truth because you want to be liked too much. That is one of the problems of many leaders. They like to be liked too much. And you have to love people. You have to love people enough that you're willing to be disliked. Because there are times if you don't correct them, they're going to crash and burn. And you didn't help them by not correcting. You killed them by not correcting. Then you got to realize you can't help everybody. A person not willing to be corrected, you can't help them. You can be there to help pick up the pieces. But you can't help somebody that doesn't want to be helped. So our job as leaders, secular leadership and correction is a little bit different. I'll end with this. If you're in a secular position, what they do is if they need to correct you as an employee, they write you up. They read the write-up, and you sign it, and it goes into your employee book. The second time for correction, they write you up, they read it to you. Many of them will send you home. They'll still pay you for the day, but they're sending you home. Third time for correction, they bring you in after the write-up, they read it to you, and they send you home for a week with no pay. Fourth time for correction, you are terminated. The only reason they do it that way is simply because they don't want to get sued. But in the kingdom, we shouldn't have to do the fourth. The only reason you got to do a fourth on somebody is because they were unwilling to be soft-hearted before the Lord, willing to filter the information, willing to be corrected, be realigned so they don't crash, but they succeed. So today, that was an important principle. And I pray you get that in your heart. Because we all have a long time to live unless Jesus comes. And you're going to live better if you're willing to be corrected. And not just, okay, yup, well, no, I got it. I'm going to process it. I'm going to implement it. And I'm going to walk in it. And when you will do that, if your leader is truly the leader that has a heart after God and that loves you and wants to see you aspire, then you will always go higher, not lower. Thank you so much for watching today. I pray you were blessed. I went a little bit long. I would encourage you, if this is your first week, to go back to last week, and it builds off the other. Go to our website at michealspencerministries.com. Also see all the opportunities we have to help build and strengthen you as the leader and your church or your business, and see God's greatness come through you. Also, you can go to our Facebook page, Empowering Pastors, or our YouTube, Empowering Pastors, to be able to get more information and to listen to podcasts as well as to listen to these type of teachings and trainings. I would encourage you, leaders, you don't have to recreate the wheel. you can actually send these to your leaders and have them just send you a nice little paragraph of what they received out of it. That way you can invest without having to do a lot of excess time. Have a great day, and thank you for participating today.
Thank you for tuning in to Empowering Pastors and Leaders with Dr. Michael Spencer. If you're looking for helpful, life-changing, and empowering resources, Dr. Michael Spencer's books are available here. Just click on the link below and get your copies today. Don't wait. These resources will bring about the change and success you've been looking for. If you'd like to know more about empowering pastors and leaders, please visit michaelspencerministries.com. Also, if you'd like to become a partner with Empowering Pastors and Leaders, sign up online for the opportunity to do so. Thank you in advance for your financial support to help us reach into the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and Africa, and the different parts of the world. Empowering Pastors and Leaders will equip you to transform your personal life, ministry, or business to become the best leader God designed for you to be. Invest in yourself today and be the most effective leader you've ever been.